What happens when a man has just been laid to rest, and right there at his own funeral, the woman who called herself his wife stands beside her lover, calmly planning how to spend everything he left behind? When a father is gone, but what fills the room isn't grief or love. It's greed, betrayal, and the quiet certainty that no one will stop them. They say death reveals who people truly are. But if the truth comes too late when everything is already being taken, what can still be done? Do you accept it and walk away? Or do you dig until the truth has nowhere left to hide? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now, let's listen to her from the heart. The scent of lilies hung thick in the air at the Beacon Hill funeral home, cloying and sweet, almost suffocating. Soft golden lights cast a warm glow over polished wood floors, reflecting the slow, deliberate steps of polished dress shoes. Around me, the quiet murmur of condolences blended into a hollow soundtrack, familiar voices from Boston's financial elite, offering rehearsed sympathy that felt more like obligation than grief. I stood beside my father's casket, unable to cry. My name is Vale Mercer, and I make a living identifying risks, irregularities in systems that others overlook. And in that moment, surrounded by flowers, whispers, and carefully composed faces, I felt it with absolute certainty. Something was wrong. Not just emotionally wrong, structurally wrong, like a flawless equation with a hidden error. My father, Arthur Mercer, had built an empire by always being 3 steps ahead. He was strategic, meticulous, and impossible to outmaneuver. The idea that he had simply died of a sudden heart attack felt incomplete. Across the room stood Lillian Mercer, my father's much younger wife. She looked immaculate in black couture, her posture elegant, her tears perfectly timed. She clutched hands, nodded softly, dabbed her eyes at precisely the right moments. It wasn't grief, it was choreography. Behind her, slightly to the side, stood Harper Quinn, my father's senior financial advisor. She wasn't looking at the casket. She was watching Lillian. Every movement, every expression. There was a silent communication between them that no one else seemed to notice. I noticed. As the line of mourners thinned, Harper approached me. She leaned in just close enough that no one else could hear her and whispered, her voice smooth and confident, "Relax, I'll manage his millions better than he ever did." I turned to look at her fully. There was no sympathy in her eyes, no hesitation. This wasn't the tone of an employee. It was the certainty of someone who believed she had already won. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I simply watched her step back, her expression returning to professional composure as if nothing had happened. When the room finally cleared, I approached the casket alone. The polished wood gleamed under the soft lighting. I placed my hand gently on the edge and leaned down for a final look at my father's face. That's when I heard it, a faint, unmistakable chuckle. My body went rigid. My heart slammed against my ribs. It was subtle, so soft it could have been dismissed as imagination. But I knew that sound. It was the same quiet, knowing laugh my father used when he had anticipated every outcome before anyone else had even recognized the game. I slowly straightened, forcing my expression to remain neutral. My eyes shifted toward Harper. For a fraction of a second, her face lost all color. Then just as quickly, she recovered her features, smoothing back into calm professionalism. She heard it too. In that instant, a chilling realization settled over me. If my father had just laughed, then this wasn't a simple death. It was a message. I looked back down at his hands folded neatly over his chest. His wedding ring was gone. My father never took off that ring, not for business meetings, not for travel, not even for medical procedures. The absence was not an oversight. It was intentional, a single thought formed with chilling clarity. My father did not die the way they said he did. I didn't tell anyone about the laugh, not Lillian, not the staff, not the authorities. Instead, I did what I had always done best. I observed, analyzed, and followed the inconsistencies. I let everyone believe I was a grieving daughter in quiet acceptance, while I began mapping the fractures beneath the surface. My first stop was Massachusetts General Hospital. I introduced myself to the physician who had overseen my father's case. He offered a polite, rehearsed explanation: sudden cardiac arrest, rapid decline, unsuccessful resuscitation, clinical, clean, final. But I asked questions the way a risk analyst does: precise, layered, persistent. His composure shifted. He hesitated before admitting that my father's body temperature had been unusually low upon arrival. He also noted that signs of rigor mortis appeared earlier than expected. That detail lingered in the air between us. Medically unusual, logically significant. It suggested the reported time of death might not align with the body's condition. From the hospital, I returned to the funeral home under the pretense of finalizing paperwork. I spoke with the intake coordinator, asking about the condition in which my father's body had arrived. She confirmed almost casually that the body had felt already chilled, as though it had been cooled prior to transport. The comment was delivered without suspicion, but to me it was another piece sliding into place. Then I asked about personal effects. She checked the records: wallet, watch, cufflinks. No wedding ring. That meant the ring had not been removed at the funeral home. It had disappeared before my father's body ever arrived there. Next, I went to Mercer Strategic Trust. The building in Back Bay had always felt like an extension of my father: sleek, controlled, impenetrable. When I requested access to his office, I was politely denied. Legal protocols, I was told. The office was sealed pending estate procedures. As I turned to leave the receptionist, a young woman who had known my father for years leaned forward slightly and lowered her voice. "Miss Mercer, Harper has been here every night since your father passed, sometimes all night, even yesterday, on the day of the funeral. That was not the behavior of someone mourning a boss. That was the behavior of someone securing assets." Later that evening, my phone rang. Lillian. Her voice was soft, fragile, carefully measured. She asked if we could meet privately. "There are things about your father you deserve to know," she said. After the call ended, I sat in silence, mentally arranging the pattern that was now impossible to ignore. A body that was too cold, rigor mortis that came too soon, a missing wedding ring, a sealed office, and Harper, working in the shadows around the clock. If my father was truly dead, then someone was orchestrating events with chilling precision. But if he wasn't, then the question wasn't just what had happened, it was who was still in control. The house in Back Bay didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt staged, like a set preserved after the actors had already left. The curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the afternoon light, leaving the interior washed in a dim amber glow from a few strategically placed lamps. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Lillian stood in the living room dressed in black just as she had at the funeral. But here, without an audience, the perfection had cracks. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her posture less composed. She looked tired, unsettled human. "I'm glad you came," she said softly. I didn't sit right away. I studied her the room, the subtle signs of tension, an untouched glass of water, a phone face down on the table, a chair slightly out of place. "You said there were things I needed to know," I replied. Lillian exhaled slowly. "Your father changed over the past 6 months," she began. "He became distant, quiet. He started going out alone at odd hours. He took calls in private, and he moved into the guest bedroom." I listened without interrupting, cataloging every detail. Was there someone else, I asked directly? Lillian met my gaze, her expression hardening. "Not him," she said. "Me." The words hung in the air. I was involved with Harper. She continued, her voice steady now. "I thought Arthur was the one hiding something first. I thought he was having an affair. I felt shut out, replaced by his work, his secrets. So I made a choice I can't take back." I remained silent, letting her speak. "At first it felt like control," she said, "like I was reclaiming something. But then I realized Arthur knew. He was watching, not confronting, not arguing, just observing. She walked to a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope, handing it to me. Inside were photographs. My father meeting with a private physician I didn't recognize. My father entering a storage facility under a different name. My father sitting across from a lawyer I had never seen before. He was preparing something Lillian said quietly. He knew about me and Harper, and instead of reacting emotionally, he started building a plan. A chill ran through me as the pieces began to align: his strange behavior, the secret meetings, the anomalies surrounding his death. Lillian's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't think he's dead." I looked up sharply. The memory of the faint chuckle in the casket surged back, vivid and undeniable. The unnaturally cold body, the accelerated rigor mortis, the missing wedding ring, the sealed office, the secret storage unit. "He staged it," I said slowly. "He planned his own death." Lillian nodded, fear flickering across her face. "Harper thinks so too. And she's been accelerating everything: legal filings, asset transfers, access requests. She's trying to lock everything down before Arthur can come back." Her hands trembled slightly. "Harper doesn't just want the money. She wants certainty. She wants to make sure he can never reappear and take it all back." From a small dish on the table, Lillian picked up a metal key and placed it in my hand. It was cold, heavy, and engraved with a storage unit number. "He rented a warehouse space under an alias," she said. "Whatever he was planning, it's there." I closed my fingers around the key, its weight grounding me. "If I open that door," I said quietly, "I'll find out whether my father was the target or the one setting the trap." South Boston at night was a landscape of shadows and steel. The old industrial district stretched out in long rows of silent warehouses, illuminated by scattered yellow streetlights that flickered against rusted metal and cracked pavement. The air smelled faintly of salt and machinery. I parked a short distance away and sat in the car for a moment, the key from Lillian resting in my palm. My hand trembled slightly, but my mind was razor sharp. Fear had been replaced by something else: focus, clarity, inevitability. I found the correct unit and inserted the key. The lock clicked open with a hollow metallic echo. As I slid the heavy door upward, a wave of cold, sterile air rolled out to meet me. Inside was darkness, still and deliberate. I reached for the light switch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing not a storage space, but a command center. Walls were covered with pinboards filled with photographs, timelines, financial charts, and handwritten notes. Lillian and Harper appeared in image after image, leaving restaurants, entering hotels, meeting in private offices. Red lines connected dates and locations. My father's precise handwriting annotated everything. This wasn't a reaction. It was a long-term operation. On a central table lay organized folders and digital drives. I opened one marked with financial records. The data was meticulous, small incremental withdrawals over 2 years. Each transaction subtle, designed to avoid detection. Together they totaled over $8 million. The funds had been routed into accounts registered under Lillian's maiden name. My pulse quickened. Near the back of the unit stood a compact medical refrigerator. I opened it carefully. Inside were neatly arranged vials labeled temporary paralysis agent, cardiac mimic. I read the accompanying documentation. The compound slowed heart rate and respiration to nearly undetectable levels, capable of simulating cardiac death under routine examination. My breath caught. My father hadn't just faked his death. He had engineered it with medical precision. I turned to a laptop on the desk and powered it on. After a brief moment, a series of video files appeared. I opened one. Security footage played, showing Lillian and Harper in a private office, their voices captured clearly. Harper's voice cut through the speakers. "If Arthur becomes a problem, we'll handle it." One way or another. The implication was unmistakable. This was no longer about betrayal. It was about intent to eliminate. As the gravity of it settled in the overhead lights, suddenly went out, plunging the warehouse into darkness. My heart leapt into my throat. I spun around. A silhouette stood at the open entrance, backlit by the dim streetlight outside. As my eyes adjusted, the figure stepped forward. Harper Quinn. She held a gun steady and unwavering, pointed directly at me. "I figured you'd come," she said calmly. "I've been watching you since the funeral." Every instinct screamed to stay still. "You knew about this place," I said. "Of course," she replied. "I suspected Arthur faked his death. It didn't take long to find his little hideout. I've been waiting to see who he trusted enough to lead me back here." Her gaze sharpened. "That turned out to be you." She took a step closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to unlock the offshore accounts your father moved the money into. You have the credentials or the legal pathway to get them. You'll transfer control to me. And if I don't," I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Her expression didn't change. "Then you disappear, just like your father was supposed to." I stood there in the cold, silent warehouse, surrounded by the evidence of my father's elaborate strategy, staring down the barrel of a gun. The realization settled heavily in my chest. My father had constructed a trap with extraordinary precision, but I was the one who had walked into it first. Harper Quinn stood at the entrance of the warehouse, the gun in her hand, unwavering, her expression calm and terrifyingly composed. The silence between us felt suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the fluorescent lights that had flickered back on moments earlier. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain still, to think, to analyze, just as I had done countless times in my career. "I'm not sure what you think I can do," I said, carefully feigning confusion. "I don't have access to any offshore accounts." Harper's eyes narrowed. "Don't insult me, Vale. You're Arthur Mercer's daughter. If anyone can gain control, it's you." I let a moment of hesitation pass, deliberately slowing the conversation. Even if that were true, these things take time, legal procedures, documentation. It's not something that happens overnight. Impatience flickered across her face, though her hand remained steady. I noticed then that it didn't tremble at all. This was not her first time threatening someone's life. The realization sent a chill down my spine. "You're stalling," she said. "I'm trying to understand," I replied. "Why go this far?" A faint, almost amused smile touched her lips. "Because it was supposed to be simple. Lillian and I had a plan. First, we would gradually take control of the company's finances, small transfers, nothing noticeable. Then when the time was right, Arthur would pass away peacefully, a natural death. No suspicion, everything would fall into place." She let out a quiet breath, her gaze darkening. But Arthur was always paranoid, always calculating. He moved the money before we could act. $24 million gone overnight. That's when we realized he knew. Her eyes locked onto mine. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was hunting us. The words settled heavily in the air. Before I could respond, a familiar voice echoed from the shadows behind me. "And you walked exactly where I needed you to." I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. From the dim recesses of the warehouse, my father stepped forward. Arthur Mercer, alive. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The man we had buried only days before now stood before me, composed and resolute, his presence as commanding as ever. Emotion surged through me, shock, relief, disbelief, but there was no time to process it. Harper's composure shattered. She spun, redirecting the gun toward him. "Stay where you are," she snapped. "I should have known." My father raised his hand slightly, his expression calm. "It's over, Harper. Everything has been recorded. Every conversation, every transaction, every threat. The police are already on their way." Her laugh was sharp and humorless. "You think that scares me? Transfer the money back or I'll kill you both." "You're not leaving here with anything," he replied evenly, "and you're certainly not leaving here free." For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, then hardened into desperation. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot exploded through the warehouse. Instinct took over. I lunged toward her, striking her arm just as she fired. The bullet grazed my shoulder, sending a searing pain through my body. I stumbled back, the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding my senses. Before Harper could fire again, my father moved with surprising speed, tackling her to the ground. The gun skidded across the concrete floor as they struggled. Seconds later, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, followed by the thunder of footsteps. Police officers rushed into the warehouse, weapons drawn. Harper was quickly restrained, her wrists secured in handcuffs as she was pulled to her feet. As they led her past me, she turned her head, her expression no longer fearful, but filled with bitter certainty. "This isn't over," she said coldly. "Lillian won't let it end like this." The officers escorted her out, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. My father turned to me, immediately concern etched across his face. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "You're hurt." "It's just a graze," I replied, though the pain throbbed with every heartbeat. But the physical wound felt insignificant compared to the overwhelming realization before me. "You're alive," I whispered. He gave a small, weary nod. I had to be. As I stood there, blood staining the sleeve of my coat, only one thought echoed in my mind. He hadn't died. He had anticipated everything, prepared for every possibility, and set the stage long before any of us realized we were part of it. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the emergency room as a nurse carefully cleaned and bandaged my shoulder. The wound was superficial, more shocking than dangerous, but the events of the night replayed relentlessly in my mind. My father sat nearby, speaking quietly with Detective Marisol Vega, his presence both comforting and surreal. Once the medical staff finished, my father approached me, his expression a mixture of relief and regret. "I'm sorry you were pulled into this," he said. "You should have told me," I replied, meeting his gaze. "I could have helped." He shook his head gently. "If you had known, you would have tried to stop me, and I couldn't risk that." I needed Harper and Lillian to reveal the full extent of their intentions. Faking my death was the only way to do it. He explained how he had discovered their relationship and the gradual siphoning of company funds. Rather than confronting them, he orchestrated an elaborate plan, transferring $24 million into secure offshore accounts, consulting a private physician to simulate cardiac death, and setting up the warehouse as a surveillance hub to document their actions. Every step had been designed to expose their crimes beyond any doubt. "But it's not over," he added gravely. "Harper was only part of the equation. Lillian is far more unpredictable and far more dangerous." As if summoned by his words, my phone vibrated. A message from Lillian appeared on the screen. "I know he's alive. If you don't come, I'll burn everything." Attached were photographs, stacks of documents, hard drives, and files, evidence that could solidify the case against Harper and Lillian. If destroyed, Harper could potentially negotiate a reduced sentence, and the intricate structure of my father's plan would collapse. I showed the message to my father and Detective Vega. The urgency was undeniable. "We need a strategy," I said, my analytical instincts taking over. "If she feels cornered, she'll act impulsively." My father nodded. "I'll confront her directly. She'll want to see me. While she's focused on me, you enter the house and secure the evidence." Detective Vega agreed, coordinating discreet police support nearby. As the plan took shape, I realized something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer merely an observer piecing together clues. I was now an active participant in the resolution of this conflict. Before we left, my father placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Lillian isn't like Harper," he warned. "Harper acts with calculation. Lillian acts from emotion and desperation. That makes her far less predictable." We drove to the Cape Cod estate under the cover of night. The once beautiful coastal home loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the dark horizon. Every light inside was off, and the front door stood slightly ajar, swaying with the coastal breeze. Following our plan, I circled to the back of the house, while my father approached the front. The air carried a sharp, unmistakable scent that immediately set my nerves on edge. Gasoline. I slipped inside through the rear entrance. The floorboards were slick beneath my shoes, and the living room appeared ransacked drawers, pulled open papers, scattered furniture overturned. The smell of fuel was overwhelming, confirming my worst fears. As I moved cautiously toward the study, a voice echoed from the front of the house. "Lillian, if I can't have anything," she declared, her tone trembling with fury and despair, "then no one will." I froze, the weight of her words sinking in. This was no longer a carefully constructed trap or a battle of strategy. This was destruction. The air inside the Cape Cod estate was thick with the unmistakable scent of gasoline. It clung to the back of my throat, sharp and suffocating, turning every breath into a warning. The house that had once hosted summer gatherings and quiet family dinners now felt like a stage set for destruction. The lights were dim, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls, and every sound seemed amplified in the tense silence. My heart pounded as I slipped through the back entrance, acutely aware that this situation was far more volatile than anything we had faced at the warehouse. There, my father had been in control. Here, control belonged to emotion, unpredictable and dangerous. Following the plan, I moved toward the secondary staircase, each step deliberate and silent. From below, I could hear the voices of my father and Lillian echoing through the living room. My father's tone was calm, measured, designed to keep her engaged. Lillian's voice, however, shifted between anger and despair, the sound of someone standing at the edge with nothing left to lose. I reached the study on the second floor and closed the door behind me as quietly as possible. The familiar room felt eerily foreign. Moving to the bookshelf, I located the concealed mechanism my father had once shown me years ago. The panel slid open, revealing the safe hidden within the wall. My fingers trembled slightly as I entered the combination. With a soft click, the safe opened. Inside were several hard drives, neatly organized financial files, and audio recordings, everything my father had gathered to expose the truth. I quickly placed them into my bag. As I did, I noticed something unsettling: gaps in the arrangement. A few folders were missing. Lillian had already been here. She knew exactly where to look and what these materials meant. Downstairs, Lillian's voice rose sharply. "You destroyed everything Arthur you were obsessed with control. Our marriage was nothing more than a business arrangement to you." My father's response remained steady. "I made mistakes, Lillian. I prioritized work more than I should have, but I never betrayed you, not once." A bitter laugh echoed from her. "This was never just about money. I wanted to erase everything: your legacy, your reputation, every trace of the life you built." Clutching the bag of evidence, I hurried back down the staircase. As I entered the living room, the scene before me froze me in place. Lillian stood in the center of the room, a lighter trembling in her hand. The floor around her glistened with gasoline. My father stood a few feet away, his posture cautious, his eyes fixed on her every movement. Her gaze shifted to me immediately, noticing the bag slung over my shoulder. Any lingering hesitation vanished from her expression, replaced by a chilling resolve. "So you found it," she said quietly. "Good. At least now you understand what this was all about." My father took a slow step forward. "Lillian, it doesn't have to end this way. Put the lighter down." Her hand shook, but her eyes burned with determination. "If I burn," she whispered, "everything burns with me." Before either of us could react, she flicked the lighter and tossed it toward the gasoline-soaked curtains. Flames erupted instantly, racing across the fabric and along the floor with terrifying speed. Heat surged through the room as thick smoke began to fill the air. "Go," my father shouted, grabbing my arm. I held the bag tightly against my chest. Every instinct screamed to drop it and escape, but I knew that without this evidence, the truth could be lost forever. Together we moved through the smoke-filled hallway toward the back exit, coughing as the heat intensified behind us. The roar of the fire grew louder with each step, consuming everything in its path. We burst through the rear door into the cool night air just as sirens approached. Police vehicles and fire engines arrived within moments, their flashing lights illuminating the chaos. Firefighters rushed inside to contain the blaze, while officers secured the perimeter. Paramedics soon emerged, escorting Lillian out of the house. She was unconscious from smoke inhalation, her face pale and streaked with soot. As she was placed onto a stretcher, I felt no triumph, only a profound sense of finality. Standing beside my father, watching the flames devour what had once been our family home, a single thought settled in my mind. My father had orchestrated his own death to uncover the truth, but it was Lillian who had been willing to destroy everything to escape it. In the weeks following the fire, the focus shifted from survival to accountability. My father and I spent long hours working with Detective Marisol Vega and the District Attorney's Office, ensuring that every piece of evidence was meticulously documented. The recordings from the warehouse, the financial data detailing years of embezzlement, the surveillance videos, and the audio captured during the confrontation at the Cape Cod estate formed an undeniable case. Harper initially attempted to negotiate a reduced sentence, offering partial cooperation in exchange for leniency. However, the sheer volume and clarity of the evidence left little room for negotiation. Her involvement in the financial crimes and her explicit discussions about eliminating my father sealed her fate. She ultimately received a lengthy prison sentence. Lillian faced multiple charges, including conspiracy, arson, and financial fraud. With the evidence recovered from the safe and corroborated by Harper's testimony, her defense quickly unraveled. She, too, was sentenced to significant prison time and lost any claim to my father's estate. During one of our meetings with Detective Vega, another unsettling revelation emerged. Investigators discovered communications indicating that Harper had once discussed staging an accident for me as well. I had not merely been a bystander in their scheme, I had been considered an obstacle to be removed. The realization was chilling, reinforcing how close I had come to a far darker fate. Meanwhile, my father faced the complex legal process of returning from the dead. His death certificate had to be annulled. Financial institutions required extensive documentation to reinstate his authority, and public scrutiny intensified as news of the elaborate deception spread. While his reputation endured some damage, the narrative of a man exposing betrayal and criminal activity ultimately preserved much of his standing within the business community. One evening, as the legal proceedings began to settle, I finally confronted him about the choice he had made. "You should have trusted me," I said quietly. "I could have helped you." He looked at me with a mixture of regret and understanding. "If you had known, you would have tried to stop me," he replied. "And I couldn't risk your safety. Everything I did was meant to protect you." In that moment, I realized the true cost of his plan. He hadn't only tested the loyalty of those around him, he'd also risked our relationship, gambling on the belief that the truth would ultimately bring us back together. The consequences for everyone involved soon became clear. Harper began serving her sentence while Lillian was transferred to a correctional facility after her conviction. Mercer's strategic trust, burdened by scandal and legal complications, was eventually dissolved. Months later, news arrived that Harper had died in prison from a heart attack, a grim irony given the method she had once considered using against my father. The chapter of betrayal and deception had finally come to a close. Out of the ashes of the past, my father and I chose to build something new. Together, we founded Mercer Risk and Integrity Group, a firm dedicated to detecting financial fraud, conducting internal investigations, and protecting families and businesses from the very kind of betrayal we had endured. The work felt deeply personal, transforming our painful experience into a force for accountability and protection. One quiet afternoon, I sat in our new office overlooking the Boston skyline. On the wall behind my desk hung the antique clock from my home. During the ordeal, its irregular ticking had once served as a coded message from my father. Now it had been carefully repaired, its rhythm, steady and precise. My father entered the room offering a small, genuine smile. There were no more secrets between us, no hidden messages, no strategies waiting to unfold, only a shared understanding forged through loss and revelation. As I watched the steady movement of the clock's hands, I reflected on everything we had endured. My father had needed to fake his death to reveal the truth, and I had needed to lose him even briefly to truly understand the man he was. In the end, what remained was not the wealth, the scandal, or the betrayal, but the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter, strengthened by the truth that had finally come to light.